You're a wonderful audience. Thank you for coming out tonight. Minnesota rocks. I recorded an album in Cannon Falls. It was like a Brady Bunch house, and we recorded it in. Kind of worked. Well, our next speaker is the founder of People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. She's, right, let's get up. She is a vegan antagonist. Ladies and gentlemen, Ingrid Newkirk.
I'm going to have to start taking bovine growth hormone. Hello, everybody. Hello. Well, we just left Wisconsin, which is what I'd recommend you do if you ever find yourself there. Now, maybe that's just me, but I was glad to leave because, according to the Wisconsin State Legislature, I am a terrorist. I couldn't believe it. I mean, they actually named me by name as one of the reasons to pass the state anti-terrorism bill in Wisconsin. And I thought, is it something I said? And it turned out it was. And later tonight I'll say it again. Because Wisconsin's legislature may believe that freedom of speech is dead in America, but I think we should show them tonight in Minnesota on this campus that free speech is alive. I also can't believe it. I'm leaving Wisconsin and they search my bags. I mean, perhaps they thought I had some exploding cheese I was taking out. And I had to remind them, I'm on your list. I'm an extremist. I don't eat cheese. In fact, we are so extreme at PETA that we're even against catch and release fishing, which got us into trouble with Jerry Ventura. Ellen DeGeneres has a little skit about catch and release fishing, you know. She says it's as if you're driving down the street and you see some pedestrians and you hit them. And then you roll down the window and you watch them get up and you say, okay, I just wanted to see if I could hit you. You can go now. Well, what I said that got me labeled as a terrorist in Wisconsin was that I thought it might not be such a bad idea if foot and mouth disease came to America. See, I'm allowed to say that in a free country. And the reason I said it, there was a Reuters reporter in my office, and he said, tell me now, confidentially, do you think you'd be glad if foot and mouth disease came here? And I said, well, I won't talk to you confidentially, which is something you learn to do with the press, because you can't trust that. But I said, I'll tell you honestly, that foot and mouth is a terrible scourge. It's a horrible disease, but it doesn't kill people. Eating meat does. And foot and mouth is a terrible thing, but when people are too busy chewing their steak to listen to arguments about the cruelty to animals on factory farms, then maybe they need the kind of wake-up call that having foot and mouth come to this country could give us all. And because that is what happened in Europe. You know, in Europe, they first had mad cow disease, which is very, very frightening and ugly. If your brain turns into a sponge when you're not expecting it, like you haven't been out drinking the night before and you wake up and your brain is gone. country farming, you can't say finally because you don't know what scourge is coming down the pipe. But when people turned on those television sets in Europe and they saw all these cows upside down with their bodies burning, they thought enough's enough. And so many people became vegetarian overnight. It's fantastic. For the first time in their life, they went to the supermarket and they saw that plastic package and they tilted it, and that runny, gooey muck that comes out that's sort of bloody and watery, and they thought, yeah, I'm not going to put that decomposing corpse in my mouth. And they called us up and said, can we have a vegetarian starter kit? And we said, and we have that for anybody else who wants it too. So, being labeled as a terrorist this time happened because I had the audacity to say that I oppose, that I want foot and mouth to come to this country if that's what it's going to take. But it has happened before. To us, the legislation that's passing now, to any social special interest group who wants to change things and make things more positive in this country, is a bad dream, what's happening on Capitol Hill. To John Ashcroft, it's a wet dream. But before TWAT, that's what it is, the war against terrorism. In the pre-TWAT days, yes, please use that too. We need that to get around. We should make it be what it is. The animal rights movement was subjected to another unconstitutional exercise that exists in this country and has for years. It's called the grand jury, and there's nothing grand about it. If you're called before the grand jury, you go and answer questions of a panel of judges, and you are not allowed to take your lawyer in with you. And if you don't answer those questions, they put you in the slammer for 18 months. And then if you still haven't said enough to incriminate yourself, which we're supposed to be protected against in this country, but not with the grand jury, they can reconvene it for another 18 months and off you go. So back in the days of yore, 1984 and 1986, I was actually a target of the grand jury because I co-founded PETA, and because I spoke for the Animal Liberation Front. The people who go into laboratories and get the animals out. They took my, thank you, they took my saliva, they took my fingerprints, which was rather curious because I wondered, what have you done with all the other sets you've been keeping over the years? I've been arrested for civil disobedience maybe 50 times by then. What are you doing with them? And they made me write out a poem 12 times the way you do in junior school. And either they had a sense of humor or they were just mad, but it was about hunting. This is a God's honest truth. I had to write this poem out about hunting. And I couldn't resist, I had to change it. Add some lines so it had a happy ending. So the hunters had shot themselves. Which, living in Minnesota, that's fairly realistic. They go out in the woods and they have a hard time telling which is the wild turkey and which is my son. Or which is the white-tailed deer and which is the woman with the gardening gloves. And my favorite is the hunter who took the butt end of his rifle and banged in his tent post with it. Yes. So anyway, this all happened. He didn't win the Darwin Award, but he was a runner-up. This all happened because I said that I support the people who break into laboratories, and I'll say that again. The reason I do is because if my dog or my child were in a laboratory strapped down to the table with electrodes in her head, and some man with a decapitator descending on her, I would break down the door, I'm sure I would, and I'd go in and try to get her out. So I'm just delighted that there are other people who have more guts than I do, and who can look at all the other animals who don't deserve to be in those stinking Nazi death camps, and who can go in and get them out. And one day I hope they all come out, and I hope all these places are razed to the ground. And I have the right to say that in America. One other little thing on twat is I got back to my hotel room this afternoon and I talked to my office, and there had been a call from CNN, and they wanted a comment on why animal rights groups, not violent animal rights groups, or, you know, I don't know what, but no qualifying word there, just animal rights groups, are on the Joint Terrorism Task Force watch list. I mean, all I could say is the man who put together the list is depriving a village of an idiot somewhere. I also found out today that the FBI in Phoenix, Arizona has printed a publication, a little pamphlet, to help you understand the anti-terrorism bill. And what they've done is they've taken the cover of my book, which is out there on sale. They've taken the cover of my book, it's called Free the Animals, and it shows someone coming out of a lab holding a dog, and they've used it as the cover of their pamphlet, without a never you mind. You know, I mean, what happened to copyright law, boys? See you in court on that one. Anyway, my message tonight, sorry, need a little stool here to stand on, is that I thank you for inviting us, and I want you to know that you are all extremely important people, because you are consumers, you are powerful, and you have a voice, and it really doesn't matter in the end what people say. It's what you do with your life and how you spend it and what ethics you have that matter. That's all there is to it. And the second thing is that probably to me the most important thing we can do in life is to overcome prejudice. And that's prejudice of all kinds. It doesn't matter what race or religion or gender or whatever, what species an individual is. The most important thing is not to discriminate against them, not to dismiss them, but to respect them for whatever they are, and to try to understand them and not be mean to them and not bully them, and to respect them, and often to respect them enough just to leave them the hell alone. Now, at People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, we are kind of known for saying all sorts of controversial things. And before the big wake-up call of 9/11, we had to really work extremely hard and make complete fools of ourselves in order to penetrate the national media. Because the media really only wants to cover sex and conflict. And what's on TV, everybody wants to know what they're doing on the Man Show. And so we developed what I thought was our most controversial campaign, aside from dumping manure and dressing up in giant condoms and whatever, for which there was a point. But we developed, I'd rather go naked than wear fur, which is rather silly because obviously, if you don't wear fur, you don't need to go naked. You're going to wear something else. At least most people should. It's the same as if you don't eat meat, you're not going to starve. You're going to eat the wealth of other choices that you have if you become a vegetarian. But anyway, sex sells, and we are not above using it. And that was our most controversial campaign, I thought, until I found out that there's one thing that is more controversial than sex, and that is beer. Who'd have thought it? What happened is we just did this little nutritional analysis. It was really harmless. We took a glass of beer and a glass of milk, and we compared them. And it turned out that a glass of beer is better for you than a glass of milk. Which doesn't say much for either of them. But if you think about it, there is no fiber in milk, and there's fiber in beer. And there's lots of cholesterol, which you don't want in milk, and there's none in beer, because cholesterol is only in animal products. And there's lots of fat in milk, even the low-fat milk, and there's no fat in beer. So we put that information out, and we were attacked by Mothers Against Drunk Driving, who we tried to buy off with a check, but they sent it back. Yeah, they know the media too. And the press went nuts. I mean, just beer nuts. They just went out of their skulls about this. What offended them, apparently, is that they've never been to a college campus, and they have no idea that sports games are all sponsored by beer companies across the country, Budweiser and Coors, and that spring break should be renamed Oktoberfest. So they thought that People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals had this enormous power, that we were actually going to make college students drink beer, even if they didn't really think they wanted it. Of course, there's a serious side to this. We developed a website called milksucks.com. And in the first week of this campaign, we had 40,000 hits to milksucks.com. That's milksucks.com. Still up. And we know that milk is related, as meat is, to heart disease, cancer, stroke, obesity. But what we really wanted people to realize is that the dairy industry, and I know this is Minnesota, farming country, this is probably a hanging offense to say this, but it is no pal of the animals. There is no retirement home for the dairy cow. She gets kicked down the same slaughterhouse ramp that the beef cow goes down when she's no longer productive, or he's no longer productive. And we wanted people to remember where veal comes from. It doesn't just materialize. Veal is taken, these calves are taken away from their mothers when they're 1 to 2 days old, kept in a tiny stall for about 14 weeks, mostly in the darkness, fed this anemia-producing gruel, often chained by the neck so they can't turn around. It's all pitiful and miserable. And the reason it's done is so we can steal the milk that was meant for that baby. We have to do something with this useless baby, so we turn the baby into veal so we can have ice cream and sour cream topping and cheese pizza and glasses of milk. And for many people that was a revelation. A lot of people don't eat veal. They think of veal as being cruel, but they don't put 2 and 2 together and see that the source of veal is the dairy industry. We hadn't eaten veal in my home since I was 7, and my mother came home from the supermarket. We weren't vegetarians, but she had that pamphlet that showed where veal came from, and that was enough for us. Anyway, what are animal rights people? Who are they? What do they want? Well, they want an awful lot. They want a revolution in thought. George Carlin was is an animal rights person. He said he wished that somebody would invent a cockroach spray. It wouldn't kill the cockroaches, but it would fill them with enough self-doubt that they would go in the next room and think things over. George Carlin fans. Well, what animal rights means is that we start looking at animals in a different way. We all grow up with these notions about what animals are, and they're not what, they're really who, because they're not things, they're not tables and chairs. The word animal comes from anima, which is life, and that means that if you burn them on a hot plate, they scream. You know, if you take their babies away, they grieve. There was a time in our culture when we didn't believe that of other human beings, when we thought that it was all right to separate an African-American mother from her child and put them on separate auction blocks because blacks were incapable of maternal love. We really believed that in our society. There was a time when we called Jews vermin. There was a time when we thought the only good Injun is a dead Injun. There were times when we experimented on orphans and prisoners of war and GIs and you name it. And it's very easy to look back to the days of slavery and the days of all these discriminations when women were thought to be so stupid that if you gave them the right to vote, as one editorial said, you might as well give asses the right to vote. It's easy to look back and see that that was shameful and it was wrong. The trick is to look today and think, what are we doing in our own time that future generations will look back on and think, how could you treat animals that way? How could you have had them as your slaves and thought of them as hamburgers, handbags, cheap burglar alarms, toys, tools for research? What was going on in your mind? Didn't you realize that they too were individuals who had feelings of joy and love, of understanding? We should be in awe of animals. It wasn't a person who first discovered that the world was round, it was an albatross. The albatross was the first to circumnavigate the globe. Our own military out there has learned from the dolphins, it's learned from turtles who read the Earth's magnetic field. We've learned that elephants communicate subsonically, so do mice. You know, everything we learn about animals should fill us with awe. They lived in Alaska for millions of years. They didn't need Mr. Peanut and nuclear waste and pop-top bottles. They kept it pristine. And now we're going to go up there and drill and despoil. We already despoiled so much of it. We should just remember, there are others just like us. And in our lives, we can show that we understand that and that we are not going to be the last to change of our generations, but we're going to be part of the vanguard of change that the future will be proud of us for. It's very easy to look at corporations, and it's very easy to look at government and criticize them, and we should. But all these people, all these bodies are made up of individuals. People like you and me, and we have to set an example. Please use your power, use your consumer presence, your buying dollars, every nickel, either for an entertainment like a circus where elephants are taken away from their mothers and chained in the big tub, for cosmetics and household goods that aren't tested on animals or ones that are, for clothing that doesn't come as if we're survivalists of the skins of animals, and for vegetarian food. There's everything you could ever want. I'm going to show you a video now. It's just a selection of clips of the diverse things we do at PETA to get attention. I hope you enjoy it, although enjoy may be the wrong word for some of it. And I thank you again for having me. I wish you all the best in the world, and I hope you will be part of the huge revolution for animal liberation. Thank you.
Hi, this is Omar, politically incorrect. I can find humor in almost anything, but one thing I never laugh about is cruelty to animals. If you don't get the joke either, write People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, 501 Front Street, Norfolk, Virginia, 23510.